That's story one. This happened just a few months back. I work nights at a warehouse, so I sleep during the day and stay awake from 6 p.m. until around 9 or 10 a.m. Even on my days off, I like keeping the same routine. That night, I worked until 4 a.m. After my shift ended, I drove straight home, arriving around 4:15. The streets were completely empty and silent. But when I reached my house, there was a car parked right beside my driveway. I slowed down as I passed it, trying to get a good look. It was an old black car with dark tinted windows. I couldn't see inside at all, and none of its lights were on. I pulled into my garage and parked. Before going inside, I took another look down the driveway. In my neighborhood, houses are spaced far apart, so there's usually plenty of room to park near whatever house you're visiting. Parking right by my place seemed really strange when there were so many empty spots along the street. At first, I figured it was someone visiting my neighbors. Maybe they were having a party and all the closer spots were already taken. I checked out my windows about an hour later, and the car was gone. The rest of that day was normal. I slept until 6, then got ready for another work night. When I left for work, the car wasn't there, so I stopped thinking about it. I went through my shift, which was more tiring than usual. But I was excited about having the next night off. The hours dragged on until I finally got out and drove home. Once again, it was the middle of the night with no other cars around. But when I got home, that same old car was there, parked in the exact same spot as the night before. I did the same thing, drove slowly past it, trying to see through the windows, but it looked identical to before. This time, after parking in the garage, I walked down to the end of my driveway to get a closer look. As I walked there, I thought I saw something move inside the car, behind the dark window. It was just a quick glimpse from the corner of my eye, so I couldn't be sure. Maybe it was just a reflection on the window's surface. I walked to about 10 feet from the car because I didn't feel comfortable going right up to it, especially if someone was inside. Even from that distance, I couldn't see anything else. Before heading back, I decided to take a photo of the license plate, just in case this kept happening. I figured I'd probably never need to use it, but better to be safe. I went back inside, just like the previous night. I checked again later, and the car was gone. Really weird, but it wasn't actually hurting me, so I didn't think there was much I could do. I made dinner and watched TV for a couple hours, then went to bed and slept until 6 or 7 p.m. The sun had already set when I woke up. Since I had the night off, I took my usual long walk around the neighborhood. When I left the house, the car wasn't there, but when I returned from my hour-long walk, it was suddenly parked in that same spot from the previous 2 nights. I had just walked through the entire neighborhood and maybe saw 1 or 2 other cars parked on the street. So why was this one always right in front of my house? And only at night. I walked up to it, and this time got right next to the window. I put my hand above my eyes and pressed it against the glass to block the reflection so I could see inside. The car was empty. No people and nothing inside that would give me any clues about why they were there. This was one of those strange situations where it was really odd, but they also weren't actually harming me, so it wasn't clear what I should do about it. I went back inside the house. The first thing I did was grab my phone, which I'd left charging on my nightstand while I was out walking. But when I picked it up, I saw an unusual notification. It was a motion alert from one of my security cameras. For reference, I had a camera on my front porch, but it only faced the door, so it never triggers unless someone is right outside the door. I also had 3 cameras inside my home in the main rooms. The notification didn't say which camera detected motion, so I opened the app and checked. There was a 60-second video saved by the system. I watched it, and for almost the entire time, the house was completely silent, with no movement. I was starting to think this was just a system error, but in the last 5 seconds of the video, something suddenly moved past the very bottom of the camera. It was really fast. They were only visible for a split second, and only part of their head and shoulders were caught on camera. I felt my hands go numb as I held the phone. The footage was from the bedroom I was currently standing in. Suddenly, the silence of the house felt overwhelming. I could literally hear my heart pounding as I slowly turned around and started scanning the entire room with my eye. They could be anywhere, maybe even watching me right now. All these thoughts racing through my mind only made me panic more. Realizing I needed to get out, I rushed toward the doorway and out of the room. Immediately I heard movement from the bedroom right behind me. By the time I reached the stairs, footsteps were running down the hallway. They were maybe only 15 feet behind me. I got to the front door and sprinted straight into the woods. In all the chaos, I never turned around to see who was chasing me. I was focused on getting out alive. Eventually, it was only my footsteps crunching on the leaf-covered ground in the dark woods. I called 911. When they arrived, the car was gone. But thankfully I had that picture of the license plate from the day before. It only took 3 hours to find and arrest him. It was a guy in his mid-20s, and he looked completely crazy. Honestly, if I had turned back and seen him chasing me through my house, I probably would have been so scared that I would have tripped or something. The guy didn't seem to have any real reason for picking me, but it was very clear that he was definitely targeting me. There were multiple photos on his phone of my house, and even some taken through the windows at night, of me sitting in my living room. He also had notes about when I left for work and came home every day for the past 2 weeks. What's really disturbing is that we still don't know how he got into my home without being caught by the cameras. And if he managed to get in unnoticed, there's no way to know if that was his first time breaking in. With how long and carefully he was stalking me, he might have somehow learned where all the cameras were. This could have been just the first time he made the mistake of walking slightly into view of one of the bedroom cameras. Either way, I shouldn't have to worry about him for a long time. Story 2. This was 4 years ago, but I still think about it sometimes. It was storming really badly that night. I worked as an Uber driver, so on nights like these, it often gets really slow. Sometimes I don't get even one pickup. Still, I always stayed out and waited, either driving around, listening to music, or sitting in an empty parking lot watching videos on my phone. Even if I only got a few rides, it was still worth the extra money I wouldn't have made otherwise. This night was exactly what I expected. Nobody was out or going anywhere in a storm like this. For the first hour, I stayed in a parking lot, sitting on my phone and listening to the storm move through the town. After an hour, I drove through to get some food, then went back to the parking lot and waited some more. Finally, I got the notification that someone requested a ride. I clicked on it and saw they were 25 minutes from me and needed to be dropped off another 20 minutes away from their location. Usually when this happens, it's because no other Uber drivers are working, so I'm the closest available driver, even though I'm far away. I had nothing better to do that night though. I accepted it and started driving over to them. They had marked the exact location where I should pick them up. The drive there felt like it took forever. Maybe it was the storm outside, or just the fact that nobody else was on the road. At certain points, I almost forgot I was going to pick someone up, and it felt more like I was just driving without purpose. It didn't help that the road was taking me out to the middle of nowhere. I'm not even sure I'd ever been that far in that direction, because nothing was out there. Finally, after about 35 minutes, I made it to the location marked on the map. It was at the corner of 2 roads, but 2 roads in the middle of absolutely nothing. Empty fields and trees on both sides of me, and more importantly, nobody was there. I confirmed on the app that I'd arrived at the location, then just sat in my car looking around, wondering what they were doing way out here with a storm overhead. After a minute of looking around, I looked down at my phone again and started texting them to see where they were. Right then I saw someone in my side mirror coming up behind my car. They opened the door and got in. I had no idea where they even came from. I never saw them on the road, or even by all the trees. The man was completely soaked from the rain and had a disturbed, almost angry look on his face. "You ordered the Uber," I said, and he responded by saying my first name, which confirmed he was the right person. I started driving. A few minutes passed, and something about him felt wrong. First of all, he was sitting in the middle of the back seats, so he was right in view of my mirror every time I looked back. He also just had this really uneasy feeling about him, like he was planning something. I really wanted to ask what brought him out here, and why he was out in the pouring rain in the middle of nowhere, but I also didn't want to cause any problem. As we drove further into what looked like even more empty areas, I thought it would be best to ask, and maybe get an answer that would make me feel better. "Hey, so what brings you out here anyway? I mean, with the storm and all, I said as friendly as possible. I looked at him in the mirror. His eyes quickly looked away from mine. He looked like he was going to say something, but then he didn't. He completely ignored my question and looked really suspicious while doing it. That didn't make me feel good at all. Even worse, the guy seemed to get more restless now, looking around more and keeping an eye on me in the mirror. Having to focus on the road with the rain pouring on the windshield, it was really nerve-wracking not being able to see what he was doing behind me. But then he suddenly spoke. "Drop me off here." Confused, I started to ask if he was sure, but he cut me off, repeating himself. "Drop me off here," he demanded. Something was clearly wrong, and I wanted no part of it. I did as he said, pulling over to the side of the road. He moved toward the door to leave, but I caught him glancing at my phone, which was sitting on the center console with the Uber app open. He put his hand on the door handle, but hesitated. After a brief pause, he looked back at my phone, then pulled out his own phone and checked something on it. Somehow in that moment, I knew exactly what was going through his head. He had been reminded that the app had his full name and everything, so whatever he was planning to do, and that I was clearly suspicious about, would be connected directly back to him. I knew it the second I saw his eyes look at my phone, the realization hitting him. Don't worry, I'll cancel the ride from my end. It won't charge you," I said, hoping to change his thoughts and pretend that I wasn't suspicious of anything, and that by canceling it, maybe he'd think his information would be deleted or something. He stared at me, his eyes still angry and cold. After another few seconds of hesitation, he got out the door. He walked out into the storm and disappeared in the fog and rain within seconds. I drove away immediately before he could change his mind. Even though I basically had no proof that this guy was up to anything, I still quickly reported his behavior to the police. You just never know. Several days passed with nothing, until I got a really unfortunate call. Someone had gone missing that night, last seen near the forest that was just off the road where I picked the man up. They called for more information about what happened that night, but after giving them everything I could, they didn't find him or anything else. Unfortunately, with the storm, any tracks or evidence were likely washed away and gone by the time any searches could be made. They never found the missing person or the man I picked up. I was the last known person to see him. I think I'm really lucky that I didn't go missing that night as well. Story 3. This was on what I thought would be a normal weekday for me. However, it turned out to be far from that. Being early April, it was raining a lot around here. My job was partly indoor and partly outdoor, so it was always 10 times worse when it was raining. It wore me out by the time my shift was over. I got off work at 6 that day. I drove through the rain 30 minutes to my home, which was tucked away in the rural part of town. Strangely, as I pulled down my driveway, which was just mud at this point from all the rain, I noticed another set of tire tracks, like another car had recently driven down to my house. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was a mail truck or something, until I got home and noticed no mail or packages at my doorstep. Odd, but from the tracks, it looked like when they got to the house, they just turned around and left. Probably just took the wrong turn. I went inside and got out of my soaked work clothes, then went to the kitchen to make something quick for dinner. It was maybe 7:30 when I thought I heard a knock somewhere by the front door. I say thought, because it was only a single knock and it was kind of quiet. Plus, with the rain and all, it was hard to hear. I got up from the living room and walked to the other side of the house to check the front door. When I opened it, I was hit in the face by rain and wind, yet nobody was even on my porch. I looked around for a few seconds before closing the door to keep from getting drenched. It was probably nothing anyway. I went back to the living room, where I was watching a show while scrolling on my phone. Nothing really happened for a while, at least an hour, before I got up from the couch to use the bathroom. When I walked out of the room though, I noticed something really strange. There was a mark on the floor. It looked like a little bit of dirt or mud, which really stood out because the tile floors were white. I knew I didn't wear my shoes through the house, especially not with them being muddy and wet from outside. Also, I was confused about how I didn't notice it before. Where the spot was located was basically right behind my couch, which faced the other direction because the TV was on the far wall. I grabbed a cloth and cleaned it up, but still felt really weird about it. It seemed like it was going to be just one of those things that happens sometimes where you never really understand it, but it's not exactly important in any way, so you just forget about it and move on. The thing is, it did cross my mind that maybe it was someone else, but it felt more like me just scaring myself over nothing. I used the bathroom, then went back to the couch. I'd be lying if I said I just forgot about it though. This felt different, like I had a bad gut feeling about it. I couldn't help but constantly look over my shoulder, feeling like I was being watched. Like that feeling you get after watching a horror movie. With the couch set up the way it was, the whole bottom floor of the house was behind me, which felt kind of unsettling now. It got to the point where I was so uncomfortable that I had to turn the TV off and go upstairs to my bedroom. At least in there, I could be in my bed with my back against a wall without the feeling that something was behind me. I had a small TV in there as well, so I just continued with my night the same way. About 20 minutes passed, and feeling more comfortable in my room, I was just starting to forget about everything when I suddenly heard something from outside my bedroom door. I'm not sure what exactly it sounded like. It was just a muffled thump, maybe a footstep or something hitting the wall. I didn't know, but it was enough to make me instantly feel unsettled again. I got out of bed and walked up to the door. I put my ear against it and listened. I didn't hear anything. I stood there for a moment while I gathered up the courage to open the door, telling myself I had to make sure nothing was going on. I opened the door and looked down the hallway. It was empty and quiet. I knew if I wanted any kind of peaceful night, I'd have to check around the house as well. The only other room upstairs was the spare bedroom, which was a rarely used library and storage space. I started to walk over when out of nowhere, the TV downstairs turned on, and I could suddenly hear the show I'd been watching being played at full volume. My heart felt like it was burning in my chest from the fear that just shot through me. I ran down the hallway and rushed downstairs. The whole floor was dark except for the TV light flickering and flashing on the walls. I turned the corner into the living room, unsure what to expect, but nobody was in there. I carefully and cautiously walked up to the TV, scanning the whole room as I did, and used the button on the back to turn it off. Was this somehow just the TV malfunctioning, or was something actually going on? All the random things that had happened that night just kind of added up. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and began checking every area of the house. I should have called the cops right then and there, but honestly in the moment, it didn't seem like it would help much if someone was there because they wouldn't arrive for another 10 or 15 minutes anyway. I checked the whole first floor, and throughout all of it, I never found even a single other thing wrong with the house. I then quietly walked back upstairs, but by this point, I was sure this was all just a series of unusual but meaningless events. I got up to the hallway and walked to the spare room, slowly opening the door. I hadn't been in there for a while, but it all looked the same until I noticed something lying on the floor by the closet. It was the TV remote for the one downstairs. Blood drained from my face. I backed up and ran downstairs and out of the house as I called the police. Sure enough, when they got there, they found a couple other signs that someone else had been inside, including a broken lock on one of the downstairs windows. Most likely, whoever it was had visited my house earlier in the day while I was at work, probably driving down my driveway and knocking on the door to see if I was home. After realizing I wasn't there, they probably drove away only to come back and break in. They were inside the entire night, quietly lurking around the house. Maybe they really were watching me all night. It still makes me shiver just thinking about it. When I went up to my bedroom, they must have grabbed the TV remote, and obviously they turned it on to distract me as I was walking up to the spare room they were hiding in, giving them enough time to slip out of the house. It's almost 100 times creepier that nothing was stolen, and there were no clear signs of what they were there for. Hopefully, if anything else happens, I'll still be around to tell you about it.